So, as I promised yesterday, I thought I'd speak a little bit more about the 7 factors of enlightenment in some detail. Yesterday I spoke a lot about sati, which is the central factor, and so I thought I'd talk a bit about the other 6 and how they relate together this evening. So there's all kinds of different ways you can consider these, but I thought it might be an interesting idea to put them together in pairs. Because if you look at them, reflect upon them, as I said yesterday, 3 of them are the arousing factors and 3 of them are the calming factors. So if you line them up together and consider them as pairs, then it can give us a clearer picture of how these qualities of mind work together. So, and also, hopefully this will be practical advice, things that are meaningful and useful to everyone. And again, there will be a section, a period of time at the end for discussion and questions, and if anything needs clarifying, then I encourage you to speak up. So maybe the first pair to consider, you can put together samadhi, concentration, and virya, or energy. Particularly in terms of meditation, those of us have some experience or some years of meditation practice will have encountered the need to balance these 2 qualities. Concentration is the ability to bring the mind to a single point. Energy is the quality of arousal and exertion, or the quality of intensity of awareness. So if these are imbalanced, then if we have too much energy and not enough concentration, then we find ourselves very agitated. The mind is very, very busy and agitated. The whole system is stirred up, and so the mind might be very bright. You're not feeling sleepy or dull, but you're bouncing around on your cushion. Your mind is jumping here, there, and everywhere, and there's no quality of focus. And at the other end of the scale, if there's too much concentration and not enough energy, then the mind can get very, very focused, but can get very, very narrow. Rather like if you've ever used there's an American kind of torch or flashlight called a mag light, and when you adjust the if the battery is getting low, you can adjust the intensity so that even if there's just a little bit of power, you can make it give you a small bright spot, but all the rest is very, very dark. If you turn the adjustment the other way, then the beam gets very, very big, but becomes quite dull. There's not much light to go by. So when there's a lot of concentration and not much energy, it's like when you've got a low battery on your mag light and you've concentrated it down, you've got one little bright spot. Sometimes that's enough. But for those of us who've done much meditation, particularly been on meditation retreats or sitting meditation early in the morning, you might have that feeling of, oh, I feel quite bright and clear this morning. Oh, everything is quite cool and calm. And, oh, that hour went by very quickly. Ever had that experience that you think you're wide awake and then that hour just went by in a flash. And then you say to your friend, oh, I had a very good meditation this morning, my mind was very calm and peaceful, and they say, you were totally out of it. Your head was on the floor. And didn't you notice? Oh, no, I didn't realize at all. They said, oh yeah, you were nodding all over the place. Really? And I had that same experience the reason why I use that example is because I had exactly that experience in Thailand. I said to one of the novices, quite innocently, yeah, it's really interesting, the evening sitting seems to go on and on and on. You know, it's like, you know, you're uncomfortable, the mosquitoes are biting you, and it really hurts, and you know, you're just waiting for the bell, and morning it's a little bit cooler, and the mosquitoes are not so active, and yeah, time just goes by like that. And they said, well, you know why? Because your nose is touching your chest. You know? I've got a pretty long nose, but you have to be really slumped over and be completely out of it for that an hour to go by, and that's what feels like 10 minutes. So subjectively, the feeling can be wide awake, but actually it's just the whole mind has become very, very dull. So in terms of the balancing the factors, these factors of enlightenment, then energy and concentration need to be sort of brought into harmony with each other. So you can think of it as a sliding scale. So you've got samadhi at one end and virya at the other, concentration and energy at the other, and then you try to get your slider neatly balanced in the middle, so you've got an equal and appropriate mixture of the two. And again, as I was saying yesterday, mindfulness is the thing that helps you to notice what's going on. That's what enables us to see where the slider has got to. Whether there's too much energy, whether you're feeling agitated and busy, the mind racing here and there, and so then if you see the mind there's too much energy in the system, the body is really charged up, and the mind is hyper alert, then you recognize I need to lean more towards the concentration. I need to calm things down and to bring the mind to a single point. I need to make more of an effort just to bring the attention to a single point and to settle on the present moment. Or if you see that the mind has got a lot of concentration but is quite dull, then you recognize, oh, I need to rouse more energy, I need to bring more vitality into the system. Open your eyes and straighten the posture and so on. And I'll talk a bit more about these aspects of how to work with different obstacles in a little while. So, so then, considering this, and by the way, this is I completely invented it for you guys. So this is a previously undelivered teaching. So I didn't invent the Dhamma, but I just was considering this, and this is how it put itself together in my considerations. And so, looking at these qualities together, it seemed that then the qualities of Dhamma Vijaya, or investigation of reality, and equanimity, upekkha, they go together as a pair. So you can consider this as the way that the mind relates to the content of the object, whether in the objective world, how the mind relates to the patterns and content of what is being experienced, what we feel or hear or see or think. So the Dhamma Vijaya is investigation, so it's like exploring the different patterns that are there of what this might relate to, or what this is associated with, or what this might imply. So it's that faculty of mind that derives meaning and understanding through exploring patterns. So that's so at the one end of the scale you have this interest in the content of the objective experience. And then at the other end of the scale you have upekkha, which is serenity or equanimity. It can be also translated as indifference, as in disinterested, but disinterest. But for those of you who have a sophisticated command of English, I would say it's more like non-interest rather than disinterest. So that you're not letting the mind dwell upon, oh, you know, well, she's got black hair and he's got white hair, or this is a man, you know, that's a woman. But the mind is taking the attention away from the details of the object and is cultivating a non-interest, so not going into the detail. So upekkha is how, in a way, it's the attitude of evenness of mind. So it's in the face of complexity, in the face of activity or agitation, upekkha is the attitude that is cool. In the midst of agitation, it doesn't get agitated. So there's a, if you like, a non-interest in the details of the object. And so that then, if you have too much upekkha and not enough dhammavijaya, then it goes towards indifference. Like, I don't care, whatever it is. The mind just sort of becomes dull or indifferent. It becomes unfeeling. If there's too much dhammavijaya, too much investigation, not enough equanimity, then it's like, oh, what's that? That's interesting. Well, have you heard about that? That's really cool. Wow, that relates to this. Yeah, in a moment, we're scattered all over the universe, and that there's an excess of interest, an excess of investigation, and the mind just gets lost in conceptualizing and creating associations that might be valid but are not terribly necessarily very helpful. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that again you have this sliding scale between equanimity, like a non-interest in the content of experience, and then to dhammavijaya, which is the exploring, investigating, the sort of intellectual faculty, or the quality of intelligence. Like when you're doing intelligence tests and the question says, how do these 6 different patterns relate to each other? Which is the odd one out? So that's dhammavijaya, is that kind of quality of exploring and comparing and relating the qualities of the experience with each other. So then the other pair, that gives us piti or rapture, and then passaddhi, which is which you can translate as tranquility or calmness. And so this is more about the emotional quality of the subject, on the subject side. So piti is a rapture or joy. So it's again, like a bit like virya, it's a kind of energy in the system, but it's more of the emotional tone of brightness and enthusiasm and a kind of bubbling, yes, kind of quality. So it's got a physical aspect and a mental aspect. So when people talk about the experience of piti in meditation, then they will describe it as energy sort of running through the body or running up the spine, or feelings of say almost like an electricity running through the body, through the limbs, and there's a kind of bubbling joyfulness in it. Passaddhi, so it's in a way it's the mind creating waves of joy or waves of enthusiasm, but they're skillful, they're wholesome waves. But they're waves of energy, and both on the mental level and on the physical level. So then passaddhi is no waves, or minimizing the waves. It's the quality of tranquility, so that if you like, the way it relates, not to get too complicated, but in a sense, upekkha is the attitude towards the waves. And the passaddhi is minimizing the waves. So it's that the mind being very, very settled and calm, tranquil in that respect. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So whereas upekkha is the attitude towards agitation, passaddhi is minimizing the agitation. And passaddhi has the physical element. So they speak about calming the physical formation, and then also the mental side, the calming the mental formation. So it's letting the mind and training the mind to be free of agitation, free of thought, and the body fully settled and relaxed and at ease. So again, if you have too much passaddhi, too much tranquility, then everything just becomes sort of dead, numb, and flat. And if there's too much piti, then you're bouncing off the cushion, and you're often, if there's too much piti, you'll experience what they call like involuntary bodily movements. You'll get a lot of strange physical sensations like energy, what they call kriyas in the yoga tradition. So that's too much. In the Buddhist terminology, that'd be like your piti factor is going wild. So the rapture element is getting out of control and is unbalanced. And so that would be when someone is sitting in the meditation hall going, yeah. And again, I speak from direct experience. I had a certain amount of that, to the great surprise of people in the meditation hall. I can tell you some stories later on, if you like. But that's the piti, or the rapture factor, getting out of balance. So then piti and passaddhi again need to be balanced together. And once more, it's mindfulness that tells us where, if you've got loads of energy shooting through the body and you're having sort of strange sensations all over, then that's telling you, okay, there's a lot of rapture, the mind is wide awake, there's plenty of virya and piti, but this is out of balance, and things need to settle, to calm down. So then using the quality of mindfulness to then bring attention into the body, let the body fully relax, to let the mind settle, there to be mental relaxation as well. So then these faculties, these different aspects, work with each other in this way. And as I said, I had conjured up, in a way, put these together in this way this evening. To help explain these points. So please don't think this is the only way, like this is the Ajahn Amaro doctrine. It's like it's not supposed to be any kind of fixed or absolute way of considering these different qualities, but you can consider and explore them in these relationships. And if that's helpful and useful to you, then I thought it would be likely that will be something that's a benefit, and also just in my own experience that this is how these things work together. But as I say, other people's experience might be different, and you might find that these different qualities work together in other ways. But we can talk about that a bit later on if you like. So then another aspect of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And in the teachings, the Buddha often brings them together in comparison. On the one hand, you have the 7 bojjhangas, the factors of enlightenment, and their counterpart, which is called the 5 hindrances, another useful list, the 5 nivarana. So nivarana is not to be mistaken for nirvana. Easily done. Nivarana means hindrance or obstacle, things that get in the way of samadhi, that obstruct clarity of mind, that obstruct enlightenment. And so that the Buddha often lines these 2 sets of qualities up against each other. So probably, as many of you seem to be quite experienced meditators, you probably come across the 5 hindrances, either having had them named by your good teachers here, Tor and Itamar, or other teachers, or you just met them face to face in your meditation. But I thought I would speak a bit about these 5 nivaranas, the 5 hindrances, as the sort of counterpoint, or the shadow of the 7 factors of enlightenment. So the Buddha used a variety of ways of illustrating these qualities. So I'll just list them for you first of all, and again, I still haven't quite got around to making the the diagrams for the walls, but maybe that will happen. But if you just listen closely, and maybe you'll be able to remember them. So the first one is karma raga, or sense desire. So that's the mind chasing after pleasant sense objects, things that we like to see or hear or smell or taste or touch. So sense desire, karma raga, is the first one. And then the second one is ill will or negativity, aversion, and that's vyapada. The third one is dullness, sleepiness. I was speaking a bit about that a bit earlier. So the mind drifting into dull and sleepy states. So you see in the English translations of this term, it's called sloth and torpor. These are not very common English words, but I'm sure the condition, any one of you done more than 2 or 3 periods of meditation, the actuality will probably be familiar to you. So when the mind is drifting off during the meditation or during a Dhamma talk, can easily happen. And so it's not just confined to meditation periods. But that's called tinamita. Then the opposite of that then is restlessness. Restlessness and worry, or restlessness and agitation. And that has the wonderful name of udacha kukucha, which almost makes you feel kind of itchy when you, just by saying the word udacha kukucha. And so it describes that kind of itchy, restless condition. And then the last one of the 5 is doubt, skeptical doubt. The mind caught up in worrying. Am I doing the right thing? Should I do this? Should I stop the mindfulness of breathing? Should I do some body sweeping? Or maybe this is the time to start doing vipassana. Or maybe it's not. The mind caught into doubting and should I do this? Should I do that? That whole entanglement in thinking, skeptical doubt. And is this right? Is this not right? What's the best thing? Yeah. Is this the right path? Is this the wrong path? So the Buddha used a variety of very useful similes to describe these. So there's one particular discourse and the Buddha was very gifted at speaking in ways that fitted the people he was talking to. And so he was talking to a Brahmin called Sangarava, who was a Brahmin priest, and he practiced ritual bathing, so the purification through bathing in the river Ganges. And so the Buddha used the analogies of water, and different aspects of water, to explain things to Sangarava. And the question that Sangarava had was, how come when you try to learn the chanting, you learn trying to recite the passages from the scriptures, sometimes you can remember things quite easily, and sometimes you can't. No matter how hard you try, sometimes you can't remember things when you're trying to learn the scriptures. And then the Buddha speaks about the 5 hindrances, the things that obstruct the mind's ability to attend, to learn, to retain, and to recite. So that was the particular source of Sangarava's question. So then he said, he gave a series of analogies. So he said, sense desire is like water that's had red dye or yellow dye or blue dye or green dye put into it. The water is coloured, and so that the natural clarity and purity, or the ability to see through the water, is affected by the fact of it turning green or blue or red or yellow. So sense desire is like the water being dyed a different colour, losing its natural colourlessness. Then aversion, ill will, he said, is like boiling water, when the water's bubbling and seething. That if you look into boiling, whereas you might be able to see your face in water that's coloured, just the fact that it's a different colour doesn't make that much of a difference. But if it's boiling, bubbling away, you can't see a reflection at all. There's a whole quality of heat and disturbance that's there. Then dullness, sloth and torpor. He said this is like water covered with pondweed or algae, scum. So the kind of grey, green scum on the surface of the water. You look in that, like, no way can you see your reflection in that. And this has got this kind of rank, stinky. Any of us who've been around a pond that's got overgrown with pondweed, you know how it's got that kind of dull, what they call rank or stale quality. It's a very good way of describing the dull mind. So he said like water covered in pondweed and algae. And then udacha kukucha, restlessness and agitation, worry. So it's like water that's blown by the wind. It's thrown up into wavelets and ripples, so that the water might be clear, but you still can't see your reflection in it because it's so agitated and turbulent. And then doubt. Doubt is it gets special treatment. So doubt is like water that is muddy, so that it's really dull and dark in the actual quality of the water, and it's also put away in a dark cupboard. So that not only is it say filled with mud on its own, but also you're locked away in the dark, and so you really have no hope of seeing anything in it, because it's really in a state of darkness and dullness. So in a way, he points to doubt as being almost like a particularly significant hindrance to meditation and to concentration and to enlightenment, because I think he realized even at that time we might feel that, oh, it's only in the modern age that we're obsessed with thinking and conceptual thoughts dominate our world, but I suspect it was very much the same in the time of the Buddha, and that huge amounts of time and energy and effort get used up dwelling in our thinking mind and believing in our thoughts and opinions, our projections about past and future, and in our worries and doubts when the mind buys into the content of thought, and particularly getting caught up in doubt, then we can be like the muddy water locked away in a cupboard. It's really a major obstacle. So another set of similes that he used, which is also quite useful, was when he described each of the hindrances, sort of ways that our personal freedom is inhibited. So that the first of these says sense desire is like being in debt. When you owe somebody some money, that feeling hanging over you, like, oh my goodness, I owe all this money to the bank or to this friend, and I've got to pay the interest on it, and oh dear, there's this debt that's weighing on my mind. But then being free from sense desire, he said, is like the delight of being free from debt. You haven't got any debts, you've got nothing to pay off, and you have a sense of freedom that comes from that. A little anecdote comes to mind in speaking about that. When I was, I lived in the United States for quite a long time, but I grew up in England, and then was invited to go and teach, and then eventually, and then afterwards to go and live in the USA. So, in one of my early trips, I was up in Seattle, and I hadn't really quite got my mind around the great American way of life. And so we were walking in Seattle, and we were in the business district, and this fellow who was part of the Buddhist group there was a lawyer by profession. And we were walking through this quite prosperous area of town, and lots of people on the street and going shopping and such like. And I made some sort of comment about, oh, this looks like a pretty rich area, and these people have plenty of, these people look like they've got plenty of money. And then the man who was with me made the observation, well, actually, Ajahn, you've got more money than they have. So I said, I'll guarantee that you've got more money than 9 out of 10 people on the street here. And I said, but I don't have any money at all. And he said, yes, but you don't have any debt either. I kind of looked at him. He said, 9 out of 10 Americans live in a state of debt. And so, even though you have zero money, you've got a lot more than 9 out of 10 people that look very well off and are busy going shopping in these posh, these fancy stores. And so then he explained how, at least at that time, or probably even more now, that most Americans live one paycheck away from running out of cash. And they said, have you noticed how many adverts there are for credit cards? And then he explained how easy it was to get credit, and how many people spend their lives dealing with debt. So then I felt this sudden sense of like, oh, well, I didn't even realize I was free free in that way. But then a sense of compassion for, well, all these good people out here have got this weight hanging over them. So the Buddha compared sense desire, freedom from sense desire, as being free from debt. So then the second one, ill will, he said this ill will is like being in a state of sickness. That you're ill, you're suffering, you're afflicted, you're in pain, you don't know when you're going to recover. And then being free, and then getting your health back, recovering from your illness, is like being free from ill will. That your heart is no longer criticizing or blaming or getting annoyed with other people or other things. It's like being back in a state of health, regaining your health after a period of sickness. There's a sense of, oh, thank goodness that's over. Or, oh, this is great. I feel comfortable and at ease again. My illness has passed off, and it was not going to be there forever. Then the third one, dullness and sleepiness, sloth and torpor. So this is like being in prison, being locked up in prison. And then when the heart is freed from dullness, from sleepiness, then it's like a prisoner being let out of jail. You know, hooray! no longer locked up and free from prison. Now I can go where I like. So the mind free from dullness and sleepiness. Then let's see, the next one he compared to slavery. Someone who's kept in a role of slavery. They're under the domination of another. They're owned by somebody else. They're in a situation of being a slave. Is like when you're caught up with restlessness, and when the heart is free from udacha kukucha, from restlessness and worry. It's like being freed from slavery. You're no longer having to always do something, go somewhere, be busy. But you can be at ease. You don't have to be doing something and engaged in some activity in order to feel good. You can be comfortable doing, and you can be comfortable not doing. You're not always hunting for something to occupy your attention and be busy with. And then the last one, he compared to crossing a desert. So just as if you're crossing a desert and you're hungry and you're thirsty and you don't know whether you're going to get to safety on the other side, and there's bandits that might attack your caravan, your horses, camels, and whatever, then and take your things. You're in a state of fear and tension, discomfort. But then when you get to the other side of the desert and you've got a safe place to be, like if we were in Jerusalem today and we went to visit the old Khan, the caravanserai. They're having safely got across the desert, got to the Khan in Jerusalem, a safe place. At last, water, food, shelter, good friends. So, that's the feeling of being free from doubt, no longer caught up in doubt and mental confusion. So you don't have to. You won't be tested on all of this. You see, a few people have been taking notes with we can give you sutta references if you want later on. But I think that the second set of similes I gave, that's in sutta number 39 in the Majjhima Nikaya, and the other one, the Sangarava, is called the Sangarava Sutta. It's in the connected discourses. It's a discourse to Sangarava. Sangarava. So then, there's another really interesting discourse, just to sort of continue that theme about the hindrances and the factors of enlightenment. And this is also from the connected discourses, and it's section 46, sutta number 51, and it's about feeding and starving. So the Buddha uses this analogy of how if we are wise, we will feed the factors of enlightenment and we starve the hindrances. The other, if we're unwise, then we end up feeding the hindrances and starving the factors of enlightenment. So he uses this food analogy, and maybe he was talking to a cook at the time. And the Buddha was endlessly creative in the different images that he used. But this in that particular sutta, he goes into some detail about how that it's up to us. It's the choices that we make, how we work with these different qualities. We're not just victims of different hindrances or difficulties that arise, or we're not just the passive experiences of the factors of enlightenment. But these, as I was referring yesterday evening, we can actively cultivate the factors of enlightenment. But also the hindrances, we can actively learn how to let them fade away, to starve them. Maybe you're thinking, well, aren't we supposed to be compassionate to all things? But we also, and if you've got serious food issues and you have these analogies are not helpful, then my apologies, but I'm just passing on a format that was used by the Buddha, so you can do a little internal translation if you need to. But this is the way that he spoke about it in this respect. The starving the hindrances is like, in a way, recognizing how obstructive they are, how difficult they are, and how much joy and freedom we'll experience if we are able to be free of them. And so then, to first of all speak about the hindrances. So for sense desire, then he encourages the quality of dispassion, or learning how to not be entranced by the things that normally interest us or fascinate us, the things that attract us. So, say if we are fixated on beautiful music, or we are obsessed with particular kinds of food, or that we're very attracted to particular kinds of people or a particular person, and wherever the mind moves towards sense desire, and we see that that's something that's out of balance or obstructive, then developing the quality of dispassion, or seeing things in a different way. So and there are various different skillful means of learning how to say, instead of being obsessed with food and particular flavors and exactly how something was cooked, and like, wow, can you give me the recipe of that? And, oh, this is so amazing, I've got to have more of it. To notice, oh, my mind's really obsessed with food and eating and flavors, and look at that, how much time and energy I spend getting caught up in that. Wouldn't it be useful to be free of that obsession, that fixation? And so you can use different ways of reflecting and different ways of considering, and so that a lot of these methods of say letting go of the hindrances, or say understanding them, seeing how they work, and freeing the heart from them, you'll be using quite a bit of the capacity to reflect and the wisdom factor of mind. So if we consider, say, just using the example of food, then say, well, what really is this? Is just like, food is just energy for the body, really, in many ways. I mean, we build up a lot of social and emotional conditioning around it, but really, it's just like going to the petrol station and filling up your tank, or topping up your SIM card, It's not an emotionally charged experience going to the petrol station. Think, well, I think I'll go to the Esso, or I think I'll go to which petrol station should I go to today? Which is the most attractive or pleasing petrol station, or what kind of gas do I want to put in my tank? I don't know that many people. I'm not sure what sort of brands of fuel you have here in Israel, but say in England, I don't know anyone who says, well, I really want to go to Shell, just for the experience. You know? Well, actually, I'm more a BP kind of a person. And maybe because you've got shares in the company, you go that way, but it's not like choosing your restaurants or your favourite, donut shop. It's you just go to fill up your tank because you want to get somewhere. And so we can say, well, can I think about food in the same way that I think about filling up my petrol tank? And if what rises is, no way, that's completely different. Oh, that's a clue. What makes, and then using the reflective faculty, the wisdom to say, what makes it so different? Really? What makes it different? Where's that coming from? What's this loaded with? How does this work? So that we're not using these kind of practices to suppress our desires, or try and become me who's obsessed with food, trying to become me who's not obsessed with food, but more, okay, what's driving this? Where does this come from? Why is this so appealing? And what's the chemistry that triggers my mind? That when I go past a particular kind of restaurant, and my nose catches the flavour, and I'm dragged into the bakery or that particular resource of delight. What's behind that? So we're using that to see what the chemistry of that attraction is, and to dismantle it a bit. There's a wonderful, if the mind is fixated on sexual desire, there's a wonderful book I came across which is called something like Dr. Tatiana's Sex Advice for All Creation. It's a kind of fake agony aunt column. The woman who wrote it is Olivia Judson. She's an Oxford University zoologist. And it's a marvellous book that describes sexual behaviour of all kinds of fishes and insects and animals, and all the kinds of strange ways that beings multiply themselves. But it's written in the form of a kind of advice column. So, dear Dr. Tatiana, I'm an Australian sand flea, and I've got a problem with my boyfriend. And so it's kind of fun. It's a fun read. But what it does is it puts you into the mode of she both describes in sort of zoological detail the different behaviours and structures around these different animals, but also it kind of makes you realise how particular the human sort of forms and structures and social conventions are, and so it's an interesting. You don't have to go out and buy it. It's one interesting way of getting objectivity on the things that we find so compelling as a human being, attracted towards women or attracted towards men, or old people, young people, tall people, short people, dark people, light people, extrovert people, introvert people, artistic people, scientific people. What creates that spark within us that says, oh, that person's attractive, and to see how incredibly conditioned and formed that is, what we call appealing. When the mind says, yeah, but that is attractive. I mean, it is really. But if you're an Australian sand flea, what floats your boat is something very, very different than if you're a human. And if you're a woman, if you're a man, if you're older, if you're younger, if you're an Israeli, if you're British, but it's a way of, as the Buddha described in many respects, looking at the structure, the formed nature of what appeals to us. So also in the scriptures you have the Buddha say, encouraging you to kind of mentally dismantle the body, to say, okay, well, this is really attractive, that person's skin is really lovely. So, okay, well, if you take the skin off and had it on a plate, is that so beautiful? Or, wow, she's got gorgeous hair. But if it's in your soup, Suddenly that gorgeous hair becomes very unappealing. I thought, he's got great muscles. Like, well, if they're kind of laid out on a table, disconnected from the rest of the leg, like, oh. So this way of deconstructing and looking at the way that our likes and dislikes are formed, and say that this is beautiful, that's not beautiful. To say, well, what makes that beautiful? What makes that? Yeah, that's too thin, or that's too fat, that's too much, that's too wide, that's too narrow. You think, oh, well, where does that come from? What forms that? Why is that so real? And that small amount of investigation helps us to say, oh look, it's because of my conditioning, because I happen to be a woman, or I happen to be a man, or I happen to be, this age or that age. And look at that. And so then, by seeing the fabricated, constructed nature of it, the dependent nature of it, then we're no longer so, say, confused or drawn in or compelled. We're able to, in a way, to see through the illusion. And exactly the same works for aversion, negativity. When we dislike something, and something is off-putting and awful, I can't stand that, that's so disgusting, that's so annoying. Like, say you're sitting meditation and there's all that noise out in the street. Yeah. Well, what makes that noise ugly or awful? If I was into experimental music, I might have paid good money to have a recording of that. The caterwauling, the Cats of Tel Aviv Orchestra. It could be a special concert that you go to. To again playing with your thoughts and using the investigative factor to say, well, look, yeah, that's right. I have been to experimental music concerts and they were pretty weird, and yeah, we paid a lot of money for those tickets. And yeah, that's right. And it was an art. It was art. It was important and real and good. And so I call that art and beautiful, and I call that ugly and an intrusion. What's that? Where's the reality? So then, things that upset us or annoy us, and seeing how even when it's not just something that's random like that, but we see other people acting in say hurtful ways or causing harm to others, and it seems like our aversion is reasonable. This is where it gets more tricky, because we are very fond of reasonable hatred. Our culture all around the world, and I was living in the States for a long time, reasonable hatred is a major currency in the US. Don't get mad, don't get angry, get even. You're supposed to get upset. Like, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention, is a fairly common bumper sticker. So, it's very strong in the US culture, and probably here in Israel as well as many other places. And so that reasonable aversion and negativity is something to look at. And that when we are say exploring that quality of ill will, to consider, well, what's behind this? Or is more hatred actually going to help anybody? Doesn't mean to say we have to be passive or not say anything or not do anything in a destructive or harmful situation. But if I dwell in ill will, if I say, Itamar is he is the problem, so I hate him for that, then is that going to solve the problem? Is more hatred going to say bring a solution, or is it going to be like, well, I don't like something that he said or that he did, I feel very uncomfortable with that, now how can I communicate that in a way that we are able to understand each other and we can get to the root of the problem, rather than he's to blame. He's the, if he was different, then I would be happy. And that so when we are exploring that negativity or that aversion, it's it's important in a sense to see that disliking is not the same as hating. So if we taste something that's bitter, like an unpleasant taste, it's still bitter. Just recognizing this is simply a taste doesn't make it sweet. It's still bitter, but I don't have to add hatred to that bitter taste. I don't have to hate it. There's a bridge that we cross, both with desire, like liking, doesn't have to be, I like doesn't have to turn into I want. And I dislike doesn't have to turn into I hate. And so these teachings on the hindrances are a lot about learning how not to cross that bridge. So that when we like something, oh, that's very nice, that's sweet, that's delicious, yeah, that's an attractive person, fine. I don't have to chase after that or get it or own it. This is something that's bitter, is unpleasant, is difficult, is ugly. It's bitter, it's ugly, it's unwanted. I don't have to hate it. Doesn't mean that we're totally passive or that we just switch off, but we also recognize there's a difference there. And when we use the quality of mindfulness and reflection to tease those things apart, then we find, like the Buddha said, it's like being free from a disease, you know, like recovering from a sickness. Like, I don't have to hate people anymore. What a relief. So then cultivating loving kindness, as any of you have listened to Ajahn Amato's teachings in the past, that he often says it's not about thinking pink. I don't know if that expression means much here in Israel, but kind of still spraying everything with a veneer of sweetness, kind of Walt Disney-esque treatment of the world. Like, wouldn't it be nice if everyone was nice? And many of us, when we have that kind of thinking pink suggested to us, cringe. I think it was Christina Feldman once did a whole day workshop on the theme of I hate meta. Because she found that, I think many people find when you taught loving kindness with may all beings be happy, may I be happy, I want everyone to be, may all beings have everything that they want, that something goes, oh God, this is so annoying. That it instantly brings up this sort of inner rage, or the grumpy kind of inner critic. Oh, this is pathetic, disgusting, I hate this. But that's because we're being asked to pretend that the sweet, the bitter is sweet. And if you ever tried to, if you cook something and it really is sour or bitter and you try to add sugar into it, it just makes it worse. Because the bitterness is still there, but the sweetness just makes it even more nauseating. So, what Lord Sameda would always encourage and stress is loving kindness is not trying to just like everything. It's not trying to like the unlikable, but recognizing that everything is part of the universe. Even the difficult and the painful, the violent, the hurtful, is part of the way things are. We're not approving of it. We're not saying it's a wonderful thing that people act in cruel and violent, selfish ways, but we're saying here it is. So it's what I would call a radical acceptance. So it's not approving, accepting is not approving, but you're saying here it is. This is part of the way things are. So that loving kindness is like learning how not to dwell in aversion, to accept this is the way things are. And then on that quality of acceptance, then we can make choices that help to encourage the wholesome and the noble and the good, and to let go of the unwholesome. So then the next of the hindrances, dullness and sloth and torpor. This is a meditator's companion. Thank you for yawning, yes. Right on cue. Rest in time, thank you very much. So that's the mind drifting into dullness. This is a meditator's friend, we know, from many years of experience. So this is countered by rousing energy. First of all, by noticing that you're sleeping, like I was saying about it's your spiritual friends that help you with delusion. It's like Ajahn, you're dozing off there, but your friends will help you to wake up and help you to notice that you're drifting. So if your friends have been telling you you're drifting off in the meditation and you're really not awake, then there's various different methods we can use to arouse energy. So dullness works like sleep. It goes in cycles. So if you can catch the first wave of dullness as the mind sinks into the dull state, if you can catch it just as that wave begins, and if you can stop it from then sinking, following that same cycle, then you can help the mind to stay much more alert. So catching that first wave is the most useful method. And one of the ways we can do this is simply to sit with our eyes open. You take an object in front of you, either the back of the person's head or something in front of you, and when you get sleepy...
Count the seconds.
No, you can do it this way up as well. You can count the seconds, but even if it's a simple object like that, or the back of someone's shirt, it's when you get sleepy, then one of the first things that happens is that your eyes relax. So one object becomes two. So that if you're making the object this clock or something in front of you, then as soon as you notice that the vision is divided, then okay, I'm drifting. So then you sharpen the vision so that it remains a single object. And at first that can take a huge amount of straining effort, because you're pushing against that wave of dullness. But then, as I said, if you manage to push through that and keep the mind alert, then after a couple of waves, then it tends to dissipate and the mind will stay fresh and clear again. Another method is just to take something like this and just hold it in your hands. Because again, when you start to get sleepy, one of the first things that happens is your fingers relax. And then an especially easy way of doing it is if you hold something between your thumbs, like this. Put that on the camera. So then your fingers are very sensitive. You know, it's one of the most sensitive region of the body. And so if your thumbs start to drop, then it can be even a matchstick, and you'll feel it. And it lands on your fingers, and oh, I'm drifting again. Sometimes, if any of you have visited monasteries in Thailand, one of the classical methods is then to put something on your head, and then you know it's going to make a really loud noise, and everyone will know. They will know if you're drifting off. So then you're offsetting your dullness with your vanity. So you don't want to look bad. So that you're using your vanity to also sitting with a matchbox or something on your head looks pretty stupid anyway. So you're using your vanity to help keep your alertness. But of course you can learn how to stay awake while you're keeping your matchbox on your head. It's also, Ajahn Amaro would recommend also sitting on the edge of a well. If you've really got a problem, sit on the edge of a well. So nothing like a 40-foot drop. I guarantee that does work very, very well. You do not get sleepy if you're sitting on the edge of a precipice. So then, just to cover the couple of the last couple of the hindrances, then utacha kukucha, restlessness and agitation, and that is often because we are lost in our thoughts, and it's the busyness of our mind, and our thinking world is so interesting. Our memories, our plans, our ideas, our opinions, our ways of reshaping the universe, it's all so fascinating. We've got such brilliant, marvellous, interesting, colourful minds that, and when we try we live so much in our thoughts that we don't recognise how much the body affects the mental state. So often when we want to, if we see that the mind is restless, if we just try and solve it in the head realm, we are neglecting the fact that there's also a lot of tension and agitation in the body. So if we want to help things to calm down on the mental level, then one of the most helpful things is simply to establish a fully relaxed and settled posture, so that you to take your attention through the body and just notice wherever you have any kind of tension or stress or tightness, and you know, fully relax the body and the posture as much as you possibly can. So just give yourself in the middle of the meditation, you know, 10, 15 minutes, just to slowly go through the whole body bit by bit, just feeling every corner of the body, everything relax and settle and be completely still. And then when you've gone through the whole body down to your feet and back up again, then look at the mind and to consider, okay, now how does the mind feel? You know, what's the mood or the state of mind? You know, now, and almost invariably, because of the body being more settled, then the quality of ease and composure in the body then helps the mind similarly to be at ease and to be focused and composed, more settled. Then the last one, doubt, is probably a subject for a whole week on its own. For some people it's not a problem at all, but we think, doubt? I don't have any doubts, no problem. But also this vichikicha, it's not just doubt about how I should practice, or you know, should I finish the meditation now, or should I go and make supper? But it's really it's about the involvement in the thinking realm, and the mind dwelling on thoughts and being caught up in the whole conceptual realm. And so, in a way, not living our life, but living in our ideas about our life, so that we can, even if we might not think of it as so. Sometimes doubt is not really quite the most accurate word to represent it, but in a sense, it's living in absorbed in the conceptual realm, and how we can, even if the mind isn't particularly busy, it can just be off wandering. And as I think John Lennon misquoted Dr. Johnson, your life is something that happens while we're making other plans. We miss our life because of living in our narrative about our life. So we are lost in the realm of vichikicha. And so learning how to recognize the role of thought, and also learning how not to believe our thoughts is a major step in that. And so yeah, I've already been talking for more than an hour right now, but this in itself, I think, just during the course, this is one of the areas where during the course of the day, and just establishing an intention throughout the day really helps enormously, because you can't just go around all day long believing in your thoughts and being absorbed in that mental creation, and then when you sit down to meditate, assuming you can just switch it off. It's really one of the areas where it's most helpful to be paying attention to this throughout the course of the day. And so what I encourage is to take the principle of, just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. Take that as a concept, put it on your fridge, make a bumper sticker, write it on the back of your glasses. Whatever it takes to bring that into the heart. Just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. Because we tend to have this strange assumption that if a thought goes through our minds, it's an accurate representation of reality. We believe our thoughts, which is, if you consider it, if you think about it, is really bizarre, because what you think and what you believe today might be radically different from what you thought 6 months ago or 6 hours ago. So if you're right now, then you weren't right then. and if you weren't right then, how sure are you that you're right now, that that won't change again in 6 hours or 6 weeks, 6 months' time? So to, in a sense, learn how to see our thoughts differently, and it's in a way it's a bit of an inheritance of the sort of Plato's and sort of the Greek philosopher's relationship to thought as the ultimate truth. You know, the ultimate reality, or the most refined version of reality, is thought, as it inherited from the Greeks. But rather to see that our thoughts at best are a convenient fiction. Does that make sense? There's probably a good Hebrew phrase for that. A convenient fiction, that they are an approximation that is, it's a working hypothesis. It's a good enough version for this particular task or this particular consideration. But to bring that to mind and to keep reflecting on that our thoughts are not reliable. They are not they can't be absolutely true. To learn to view our thoughts with that sort of perspective, then you find that as the Buddha described it, the joy of arriving at the safe haven, the caravanserai after the desert, and the sense of refreshment. And because so many of us are burdened by our thoughts, and the endless sort of ruminating and commentating and opinionating of our mind, and to be able to just view our thoughts with kindness and compassion, but non-belief, and just to be able to consider, just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. So I often like to encourage people to consider your thoughts just like hearing the neighbour's radio. Like you're here in the city, like you didn't even choose the station. Yeah, but you can hear what's going on, there's meaning there. Like, well, I really like that, I think that's great. Just like some random radio show you're not even interested in, and you hear some person saying, this is great. Well, we can say that, we can relate to our own mind, saying, this is great. Yeah, well, that's just that thought in that moment. It says yes to this particular thing, but what's that got to do with reality? So what? And a very, very simple way of bringing this into action is Ajahn was a master of coming up with very useful and practical methods. Is that whenever your mind makes a judgment, like I like, I don't like, this is great, this is awful, just to say the word so. And it's I won't guarantee a positive result, but statistics have shown that when we apply this, it does have an extraordinary. It's very, very simple, very direct. But if you remember to do it, it really changes the way that we relate to our judgments, our likes and dislikes, and our opinions, and all the things we get excited about, we get upset about, we get involved in. So I think that's enough. My delivery for this evening, and I'd like to open things up for questions. One was delivered on paper here, but I haven't read it through in detail yet. But we can start with this one, if you like. You told us that this is someone writing to me, Galia. You told us that in the past you would sit for meditation practice that filled you with peace and serenity and spacious, yet when you got out of your room to the monastery duties, many inner demons started coming. All the peace and serenity were gone, and so the world outside interrupted your inside one, invading your space and harmony. Within the years, so you said, you have learned differently, and today the experience of peace and harmony and equanimity is within you in your everyday life and ongoing activities. I felt very much connected to those sentences. I also feel many times that the world intrudes and conquers me. I would like very much to hear more, and asking you to go into details regarding this issue out of your experience. Please emphasize how it is possible to live in harmony with life's entanglements, the familiar ones and the less familiar ones. How to be present and yet not to take the rock on your shoulders. You've got shoulders here. Shoulders. Oh, okay. But there's an H in there. I know the theory. Please answer out of your experience. Thank you so much, Kalyan. Well, just practice. In a way, it's a simple answer, but as I've been saying, one of the important things is recognizing the habits that we have of picking things up, of picking the rock up, and how we we make entanglements, how we pick things up and make things into issues, and then just to see, oh, I just picked that up. This is the feeling of carrying it around, this responsibility, or this project, or this person's feelings, and I just made myself responsible for that. Now, what does it feel like to carry this around? How did that happen? What was the means where I picked that up? So that again, using the wisdom faculty to explore, to say you take a particular event or a thing like the way you relate to your work, or the way you relate to someone in your family, and you think, okay, now how does that happen? Now that situation has just happened again. I was trying to avoid this. Now, how did that happen? What was using your memory and the capacity to explore, investigate it. Now, how did that happen? How does that work? Like, for example, when I was in the early years of Amaravati, I used to be the monastery secretary, and I shared an office with another monk who was the secretary of the charity that looked after all of the finances. So the two of us shared an office together, and I kept noticing that I would end up with a lot more stuff to do than he did. But we were in the same office, and we got the same people coming through the door, and so I thought, how come I'm always sort of doing far more than him, and I'm staying here after hours, and he seems to manage to be much more unentangled. And then I began to notice how when somebody came through the door and said, Ajahn, the roof has blown off the Dharma hall. We need some help, or what are we going to do about that? And I would say, oh, well, okay, I'll ring up the builder's merchant and we'll get some new roofing material, and and suddenly it was my project. And then I began to notice that when people came through the door and said, Ajahn, the roof's blown off the Dharma hall, my dear brother monk said, that's very interesting. I wonder how you're going to solve that. You rat. And I would just sort of take it on as my project. But he saw that he didn't have to actually assume responsibility for what was sort of coming at him and suddenly make it his own. It wasn't that he didn't care, but he didn't just say, okay, I can carry that too. And so it's just more of a businessy type encounter. But we do it on the emotional level as well. When somebody is excited, and you feel you're supposed to be excited with them, suddenly you've joined in with their excitement, and they're upset about something, and you feel like, I should get upset too. And so that seeing how we have particular patterns of behavior, where we relate to other people and different situations, and how we find ourselves just following habits, and to recognize, well, do I have to do it that way? Or is there a different way of responding to this? Or, yes, I care about that person, but I'm really not upset about the same thing they're upset about. Or I'm not excited about the same thing they're excited about. And do I have to follow along with that? So each situation is very different, but that just having the mindfulness to recognize how there's many possibilities in each moment, like how to answer your question, how to respond to that. There's many different ways I could respond to that. It's like, okay, what's going to be useful, or what will be helpful? What's important here? And often it doesn't take a big effort just to step back and consider, okay, what's really going to be helpful here? And in one of the Buddha's, when he talks about how to feed the 7 factors of enlightenment. The way he says how you develop Dhamma Vijaya, the investigation of Dhamma. He says what you do is you actively consider what's going to be harmful here, what's going to be benefit, what's wholesome here, what's going to be unwholesome. You consciously bring those things to mind, so that then you're using that as a way of measuring. Okay, is there something to be said here, or should I just leave this alone? Or what's the best way of responding to this? So then you're not just acting out of habit or conditioning, but you're in a way attuning yourself to the whole situation as best you can, and then giving yourself the freedom to not follow the old habits. But part of it is just when you have grasped something and you're caught up, as you were saying, when I feel many times the world intrudes and conquers you. Just really get the feeling of being conquered. Like, wow, this is heavy. This is so difficult. Just without any kind of commentary like, I'm stupid, how did I get involved in this? I want as little commentary as possible. Just let yourself feel as completely as you can how really heavy that is. Like, this is the feeling of having picked this up. No commentary, no shoulds or shouldn'ts, just let yourself, having got entangled, it feels like this. And so then you don't have to, the superego doesn't have to come in and sort of say, you should be doing this, or you should be doing that, or oh, bad girl, you've done it wrong again. But more like, just from your own natural common sense that says, oh, this is really heavy, this is pointless. I don't need to do this. And it's a kind of intuitive knowing, like a common sense, natural knowing, that is far more sort of real and helpful than the sort of the superego saying, you shouldn't have done that, you got it wrong again. You should have done it differently. Not to belittle the superego, it has important functions, but it can go on, and that sort of inner critic, the inner tyrant, can really dominate things. So that when you're able to just, as wordlessly and as directly as possible, feel the results of having hated something, or grasped something, this is mine. Just let yourself feel that I want this, I've got this, this is mine. It's that feeling of mineness. And that just the more that you let yourself fully be conscious of that, kind of owning, the more that your own natural wisdom says, this is a real pain. Why do I want to do this to myself? And then it rather than me letting go of something, it just falls away on its own, which is a very radical and more complete kind of letting go.
Thank you.
Yes, Dan.
Hi Ajahn, I wanted to ask about being carried away in the conceptual world. Us students are doing some research, we're just formally being busy in the conceptual world for many hours every day, just being there and trying to navigate, to understand, to write a critique or something like that. How would you recommend to do this during the day and still keep the attitude of not, like I feel I'm feeding the thoughts. That's my job, to feed them and do that in the most creative way, and then I meet it again in the meditation because they got strong. They have their own opinion, so that's the dilemma.
Yeah, well, if you consider that there must be a way of doing it, because the Buddha had a lot of concepts and a lot of words, and it was extremely creative with concepts. It had an extraordinary imagination, and but it's if you learn to hold concepts and words, as I said, as convenient fictions, that you're not making the assumption that the words can encapsulate can totally embody the reality. But you know that the words or the concepts, they can only point, they can only indicate, they can refer, and so then you are, in a way that actually enables, I find, it enables you to think more clearly by not taking the thoughts so absolutely. It's a mysterious thing, but you do your best thinking when you're not investing in thought as absolutely real, and then because when you're putting things into words, you're able to recollect this is a communication. The words that you use, if what I say is just me proclaiming, and I'm not paying attention to who I'm talking to, that's not a communication. The words are meaningless. It's just as if I can't read Hebrew. I have no idea what this says. These are just little squiggles on a piece of paper. This is nonsense. Because I don't read Hebrew. Yeah, you do, so you know what that says. But to me, it could be Chinese. It could just be a interesting set of patterns to decorate the white paper. So that if we don't, say, consider that the words, concepts are convenient fictions, but their purpose is to communicate. And if they do communicate, then their purpose is fulfilled. You can't guarantee that they'll communicate exactly what you want to, but you can. If that's your primary aim in forming thoughts and putting concepts into words, then that is extraordinarily valuable. As the Buddha said, he a Tathagata only points out the way. Even a fully enlightened Buddha can't enlighten other people. That he said when he was explaining this to somebody, he said once, "Well, do you know the way to Rajagaha?" And he said, "Well, no, I don't." And the Buddha said, "Well, if I tell you Rajagaha is this way, you go by this road, and then you come to a large rock, and you take a right-hand turn, and then you come to a tree, and take a left-hand turn, that'll take you to Rajagaha." Yeah. Whether if you follow the instructions, you'll get to Rajagaha. If you don't follow the instructions, then you probably won't. But I can only give you the instructions, that you have to actually follow them yourself. So he just said, that's what all words can do, is they can point out the way. But also he, very significantly, he said, there are two kinds of miracle. There's the miracle of psychic power, like miracles like reading people's minds, or flying through the air, and turning into a pillar of fire, and all that kind of stuff. The miracle of psychic power, and then there's the miracle of instruction. But the miracle of instruction is the superior of those two. So that you can hear words, and those words can enter your heart, and can change the way that you experience the world and yourself in a radical and real way. And as you point out, that's a miracle. And that even though the words are just sounds, they're just convenient fictions, that's an amazing thing, that even though it's a convenient fiction, it can have that effect of radically changing someone's whole mode of being. So, in terms of living in the university world and doing concepts for a living, just to hold that in mind, that all the concepts that you use are convenient fictions, but that doesn't mean that they're worthless or meaningless. That they are useful fictions. But I think it's important to remember that words are to communicate. If they're just a proclamation, just sort of something that you're putting out because you want to form it, it's not a communication. They're not. The words are not fulfilling their potential. But when words are able to communicate, then that miracle of transformation can really be brought about. So there's a mixture of qualities there, but it's really interesting how the Buddha produced many concepts and gave thousands of verbal teachings, but he also said conceptualizing is a disease. It's like a cancerous tumor. It's like a poisoned arrow. To point out, don't take this as the concept or a conceiving as an absolute truth. That's a big mistake. And I think it says in the Sin Sin Ming, the verses of the third chant patriarch, to seek mind, big mind, with a discriminating mind, is the greatest of all mistakes. The thinking that you can encapsulate Dhamma, ultimate reality, within a word, within a concept, is the greatest of all mistakes. But the other side of that is that the words can help us to awaken to that reality. But we shouldn't, the ancient analogy is that don't mistake the signpost for the, don't mistake the finger for the moon, or the signpost for Rajagaha. Yes.
I have several questions, but we don't have to answer all of them, or any of them. First, I didn't quite understand your new paradigm at the beginning about the balancing effects of the 7 factors of enlightenment, because I used to think of them, at least this is my experience, as some of them as a succession. For example, after rapture, I'm getting more concentrated, and when I'm more concentrated, things seem clearer. It's not that, I need the rapture to balance something which is dull in the concentration. Or perhaps I didn't fully understand your... I'm feeling it as one step after the other, and not something that balances each other.
Yeah, well, there are some discourses where the Buddha says, mindfulness leads on to investigation, investigation leads on to energy, energy leads on... So he does describe it in that sequential way. Similarly with the Eightfold Path, sometimes it's A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D. The right view leads to right resolution, right thought leads to right speech leads to right action. But it's not always figured in that way. So what I was describing this evening is just, rather than following the sequence of mindfulness leads to investigation, investigation leads to energy, but rather just talking about how the different factors can work together, because drawing on that analogy about fire with the 3 factors that are sort of energizing and rousing, and then the 3 that are calming and settling. So putting them and considering them together in that way. But it's whatever is a helpful model or whatever is useful. My basic motto is, if it works, it's the right thing. So if that model I was suggesting this evening is not helpful, then just put it aside.
Okay. But my second question is about raptures. I have many raptures in my meditation, and especially in the last year. And what I found out is that I think it's somewhat out of laziness. I try to move quickly through them to get to the peaceful states with more tranquility and equanimity. It's nice, but some of them are really intense, so I try to avoid them. But even the mild ones, they consume a lot of energy, the source of highs, and I prefer, again, the more calm states. But again, I'm not sure whether it's wise or not, whether there's states, the raptures, a place that should be well done to a certain extent, or just a gateway to other deeper states of absorption.
It's like any experience or any mental state. It depends entirely on the attitude that you use towards it. And so if you're averse to it, you're negative. I don't want to bother with this, and you push it away. Then if there's negativity, then that creates a similar negative effect. If it's more of a practical, well, this isn't my bus stop, I won't get off here,
exactly.
It's not. It's not that you hate that
No.
bus stop. It's just that's not your bus stop.
It's a nice bus stop.
Yeah,
but
it's fine as a bus stop.
I
You
want
just
to
don't.
wait- yeah,
You don't want to get off there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if it's much more practical, then there's no negativity there. It's just that's not my bus stop. So I'm just staying on the bus till I get where I want to go. Then it's very different.
Yeah, I feel the second, but sometimes I feel just lack of energy because it consumes a lot of energy, these states. So I'm not sure whether, again, it's a positive approach.
Yeah, well, it's the thing to go by is to look at the results. You know, if you see the results of working with it in a particular way, like you just pass by the rapture stage and wait till the mind is more in sort of contentment, and okay, what's the result? How does this feel? Is there any negative result of that, or what are the benefits? And so you're looking and you're exploring. So it's called that quality of reviewing is called is part of the four bases of what's called the four bases of success. Chanda, Virya, Citta, Vimamsa. So Vimamsa is that quality of reviewing, looking at the results of what you've done. So when you're interested in, so the first of those bases of success is interest. You need to be interested in what you're doing. Virya, you need to apply energy. Citta, you need to think about what you're doing. And then Vimamsa is, okay, having done that, then what's the result? Did it work out? I've got off the bus, now am I at the stop that I wanted to get to? where am I? And so Vimamsa is an important aspect of practice. Okay, I've been putting forth this effort and working in this way, what's the result? Where's it brought me to? And so then looking at the result, then that informs you, okay, well this is good, just carry on in the same way. Like, whoa, how did I end up here? This isn't going to be helpful or useful. So how did this happen? And so then the Vimamsa helps you to then make different choices or to carry on in the same way according to what the results are.
And the last question is about the will. You gave me an advice yesterday, one advice about working with strong aversion, but can you give other motive? At least for me, it's one of the hardest defilements I have, how to deal with very strong aversion.
Well, there's different kind, like I was saying about you know, just making those statements clear in your mind. There's different approaches. You can also use the wisdom faculty to consider, okay, if I follow this through, if I acted on this feeling, you know, what would happen? So using your imagination. If I carried this out, this negative feeling, if I acted on this, what would that bring? So following through the consequences in your imagination.
But I want to get rid of it in a way.
Well, I understand, yeah. But one of the ways that I've said, okay, here it is. If I follow this through, this is what it'll bring. This, and this, and this, and this. And then just by letting yourself, like I was saying to our friend Galia, if you just let yourself, okay, if I acted on this, it would have this particular result. How does that feel? No, without any commentary or should or shouldn't. If I acted on this, this would happen. How does that feel? And then, and letting the off-putting, the negative qualities of that, like, well, I don't really want that at all. And then it reaches you in a deeper and more direct way.
I know it poisons, and I'm not acting on it. It's not that
I know you're
I'm
not.
planning revenge, plans, but I know it poisons me. But it's so strong sometimes that I don't know. I know it's bad for me, but when I see some things, or if someone really hurts me, it's very difficult not to feel that. I know it's a habit, but I'm sometimes not sure whether I just have to let it be until it subsides and.
Well, what I do, there's various different ways of working with it. One method is I just use this is the feeling of hating this particular person, or that's what this feeling is, so that You're acknowledging it just as a feeling. This is the feeling of hating that particular person. Whether it should or shouldn't be there is beside the point. This is the feeling of hating. It feels like this. And again, as wordlessly and as directly as possible, this is what this feels like. And then, rather than your little superego saying, I want to get rid of this, I shouldn't have this, or this is really bad, it's just, ow! Ow! Like your hand is in the flame, ow! It's a much more complete and natural letting go of it. Also, one particular method that I found helpful is in a meditation to deliberately bring it up. So you start off by bringing your mind to as much quietness and stillness as you can, and then you quite consciously recreate a memory of an event, or oftentimes you can think of the person's name, or even just, you don't even need the name, just her, him, and you know the whole story already. You don't have to fill in any of the details. You know. So just letting the mind be as quiet and as calm as possible, and then just consciously inviting that in, so that you're bringing that person or that event consciously to mind. So then you launch that effect deliberately. And then, this is where it takes a lot of effort. You take your attention off the memory of the ideas that come up, and you bring it into the body. So if you feel rage, or you feel
usually pain.
So, but whatever it is, just to bring your attention to the sensation in the body, whether it's like a tightness across your shoulders, or your lungs kind of being squashed, or your belly kind of forming into a knot, whatever it is, because it will be different for every person, to bring your attention just to the sensation of it. So try and let go of the people and the story and everything. Just, this is that feeling of rage, or of fear, or of slow burn. Whatever it is, just to bring the attention just to that feeling, and try to be mindful of the feeling on its own. And then stay with that feeling for a few minutes, like 5-10 minutes, just quite consciously doing your best to simply know and be open, like in a way of having loving kindness, acceptance for that feeling. And what's really striking, I found, is that even in intense emotions like hatred or fear, when you let yourself fully experience the physical side of it, it's really not that bad. It's an uncomfortable feeling.
It hurts.
It hurts, but it's not even as bad as a migraine or a toothache. Or let alone a broken limb. It's uncomfortable, but it's bearable. And so then you stay with that, and we can keep it in focus for 5-10 minutes, and then consciously start letting it go, and using the breath, and particularly the out breath, to let the feeling slowly dissipate. And sometimes it takes 5 minutes to launch that feeling, and then 45 to let it go. But it's important just to stay with it, and just to breathe through it, and to let it fade until it's gone, and sort of end it on its own. And so then at the end of that period, your mind has come back to where it started from, really. So with as much spaciousness and stillness, quietness as possible. So within that, you've seen the whole life cycle. You know, it's been born, that feeling has been born, it's been known, fully accepted, and then it's lived its life through and then come to an end. So you've seen the whole anicca cycle of it, that it's a pattern of nature, coming into being, doing its thing, fading away. And whilst it's been present, there's been an attitude of acceptance, like here it is. Even if it's just for a few moments within that there was a real wholehearted, yes, here it is. I don't like it, I don't want it, but here it is, and it feels like this. So there's a degree of acceptance. This is part of the natural order. And so when you do that, and then make a practice of that, then when you're in a live situation, when you're like face to face with that person, or they ring you up, or it's really there, then rather than going on to, oh, yeah, he's just said this, and I want to say, I want to say that, and getting into the dynamics of the engagement, you'll find that part of you will recognize, oh, it's that feeling. I know that feeling, and it arises and it does its thing and it fades away, and so that you can bring your attention into the body, and that knowing that physical side of it, then you're able to, in a way, disentangle from it. So it's still there, you're still engaging with the other person, but oh, there's that fear reaction, or there's that aversion reaction, here it is, and it feels like this. So that then you, in a way, because you've practiced with it in a benign and safe situation, when it's a live one, and it's a real active situation, then you've developed some of the skill to be with the flow of emotion, but not be entangled in it. So you're not pushing the person away, or you're not reacting, or you haven't got a prepared script. Yeah, you're with the situation, but you're also, you've schooled yourself, you've trained yourself not to get pulled in and be reactive in the same way. And that, my experience of this, it has an incredible effect, when, particularly on the other person very often. When you're engaging with them, they know something's different about you. Even if at the encounter they're still reacting the same way, when they are apart, or they remember that, they go, well, she was different today, what happened there? Or like Eitan was, if I can share that, we was talking about at breakfast this morning after he'd finished a retreat, and then he encountered talking with some friends after his first meditation retreat. He thought, oh, what happened to you? You're different. And even though you're not trying to have a particular effect, people notice, and that when you're not coming from a reactive or aversive or fearful place, then that where you are at communicates itself even apart from the words that you're using. And then if you're not intimidated and you're not caught up, then that reaches people in definite ways. And so that my experience of this kind of thing is that where if you've had a very reactive relationship with someone and this ongoing tension, if you manage to work in this way and let go of it, not get caught up, then you find the other person will come back to you and say, sorry about that, I really lost it there, or like, yeah, I really think we need to reshape the way we communicate, because I realise I've been getting really.
I don't want to count on this.
No, don't count on it. But it's just my experience of it is it's most often, and sometimes it takes a few years, that someone will say, "Sorry about that, I really got lost there." But we need to be patient too. Yeah, literally, I mean, it can be like the next day. It can be 10 years later. Yes.
But sometimes, you know that you need to do. Put your mind aside and to do something. Yes, it comes from your mind. And what you're going to do, if you will do it, it will result in suffering. You have to leave your family. You know it is time to, somebody will suffer. You may refuse to join the army. It will result in suffering to you and to others. You might be in a situation that you need to kill, or you think you need to kill somebody, a human being, not an insect. It happens. Then, to stop being a monk, I don't know, I haven't been a monk, so I never stopped being a monk, but it may be under certain circumstances that you have to take it off and go to another place. And then, I don't know, it would be similar to use the qualities of enlightenment to strengthen you within this situation, but you must act. Must refuse, must kill, must leave. There is a conflict. I don't have an answer.
Well, those kind of things are very speculative, but certainly I've made those decisions in the past, not to kill people, but when I chose to become a Buddhist monk when I was 21, my family were not happy, as you would imagine. Yeah, so that I knew it was going to cause them pain, but I also knew I wasn't doing it in order to cause them pain. It was an unfortunate side effect. Just like if you're a dentist, I don't think people become dentists in order to cause others pain. Maybe if there's any dentists here. But you know, if you're going to be a dentist, you're going to cause pain to people. But the purpose is to be of assistance to somebody's well-being. Yeah, in terms of, as you say, you must. These are the kind of questions people have been asking. What would you do if you're in this situation? And theoretically, you say, well, the question is there, or would you kill this person? Would you not? I've never been in that situation. And as Ajahn Amaro, when he was growing up, he was born in the 1930s, and so when he was growing up and he joined the military, he volunteered for the US Navy, he was in the Navy. But he had a lot of Buddhist sympathies and inclinations towards pacifism, and so he was always very intimidated by, when he had, because he was at UC Berkeley, University of California in Berkeley in the 60s, and so there's a lot of talk about pacifism and objection to the military and the draft and so on. And so people would often say, well, what would you do if a maniac attacked your mother? And he said he was, at Berkeley, in the coffee shops, you get into long arguments about what you shouldn't do. And then he said, when he became a monk, he suddenly realized, I don't know what I'd do, because a maniac has never attacked my mother. But I know I will be mindful. I know that I would respond to the situation according to what was happening. I don't know what I would do. Maybe I'd knock the lights out. Maybe I'd throw an eider down over the guy. Who knows what would happen? He said, but I know I've been practicing mindfulness long enough to know that I would respond, but I can't say exactly how I would respond. And so I would follow my teacher exactly say, I don't know how I would respond. I mean, just today, walking through the bazaar in Old Jerusalem, encountered this young guy in a shop, and he said, so what are you? Are you Buddha? I said, I'm not the Buddha, I'm a Buddhist monk. And he said, so who do you pray to? And he was quite aggressive, quite assertive. I said, well, I don't really pray to anyone, but I follow the way of the Buddhists. Well, who's your God? And so we got talking. and so I said, well, I don't really have a God, but in Buddhism we don't really speak about God in that way, but we talk about Dharma. We talk about Dharma as ultimate reality. Well, who do you pray to? And I said, well, who do you pray to? He said, well, to the one God, of course, Allah. And I said, oh, okay. So I said, well, who do you pray to? I said, well, as I said, I'm a Buddhist monk. So he was quite
it's not good. He said it's not good. It's dangerous.
Yeah. But also, I quite consciously sort of went around the words and just related to him as a person. I decided in that encounter, I'm not going to be reactive towards his words and his sort of desire to contend or to find fault with Buddhism. So I just made a conscious decision just to relate to him human to human. So I just cranked up the metta beacon and just decided to generate love towards him, to respect as a fellow human being. And here we are, having this little encounter in the bazaar in Old Jerusalem. Here we are, two humans together. Hi, I love you. Well, I didn't say that, but I just let nothing get in the way, and I just was completely uninterested in his attempt to find fault, and just decided to go around that. Here we are, and it was, I don't know if you noticed, but he did say, "You're a good man," because there's something in him that couldn't say. This guy is not fighting, he's not intimidated, and he's smiling at me, and he looks really friendly, and he looks like he really means it. Well, okay, well, it's wrong, I think. And it was quite sweet, really. It was the kind of, I think he would probably remember it in some small way, but it was it was an encounter that could have gone in different ways. Yeah? So that I didn't know if a young Arab guy gets aggressive with you in the souk, what are you going to do? I wouldn't know, because you can't tell until you're right, face to face, and you are meeting. And I've had those kind of encounters, like with sitting in a train in England, getting into a train on a Saturday afternoon after a football game. I thought, oh look, there's a free compartment on the train, great. Nobody else in here. So me and the Anagarika and novice have got into this empty compartment. And then next thing you know, 8 football supporters came pouring in. And this big guy, very aggressive, and it was a no smoking compartment with a cigarette. It was a deep drag in his cigarette, looked it straight into my face, and then swore at me. Very extremely vulgar statement. Just trying to get a reaction. And so I was interesting. And then 6 other guys, all came piling in. So it was like there was just 2 of us, and this whole compartment filled with these guys. And so, if you'd asked me, what are you going to do if a bunch of angry football supporters come piling into a compartment and you've got no escape? What are you going to do? And I wouldn't have been able to tell you. But but what happened was that a couple of the guys said, so what the hell are you? And what are you doing here? And so the one who started talking, I immediately turned to him and started a conversation. And so then we got the kind of back and forth banter going about, well, what do you dress like that for? And what are you connected with? So I did not give the guy who had flicked the cigarette in my face any attention. And this other, they're all drunk. And so the other guy who was sort of chatting away and starting a conversation, he was the only one I was focusing on. And then there were a couple who really just wanted to fight. They wanted to beat us up, just any excuse to get a reaction to. And so I just kept the conversation going with the other guy, and then they start asking, so what do you do? What do you do for a living? And what about sex? What would you do for sex then? And then we don't have any sex. What? You don't have any sex? You've been along then? What, about 5 years? 5 years, no sex. So we got this deep discussion about celibacy. 5 years? Come on, I'll go off like a bomb if 5 years without having it away. Oh, I can't believe it. Anyway, it's quite an interesting little discussion. I said, well, nothing at all. Not with the other blokes. Nothing at all. No. Well, what about jerking off? No, nothing. Nada, nothing, no. Wow, that's incredible, that's incredible. I can't believe it. Well, we're not allowed to tell lies either. Wow, that's amazing. And so, by the time they all got off the train at Guildford, we were the best of friends. So the guy who flicked the cigarette in my face was a bit disappointed. Because he was really upset with his mates and not getting into a rumble. They just wanted to start slinging fists. But fortunately, their team had won. They were West Ham supporters, and they'd won that day. They were in a good mood. If West Ham had lost, I think it might be in a different story. But yeah, you don't know what you're going to do in those situations. And the conceptual man can say, yeah, but if it was serious and if a maniac was attacking your mother, what would you do? It's like, my mother's dead. She's been dead for 10 years. So that can't happen. I have two sisters. I have a monastery with many nuns and monks that I love dearly, and if somebody attacked one of them, I don't know what I'd do, but I act mindfully, and you just trust that you are able to work with situations. I do everything I could to avoid killing another human being. Speaking of mindfulness, it's now a couple of minutes before 10, so another evening has flown by, so we can wind things up there for this evening. And we have, somebody has kindly printed up the refuges and precepts, so those who would like to, you can pass these out. So those who would like to join in with making an undertaking to use the refuges and precepts, so please feel most welcome to do so. And those who prefer not to, then just can watch and listen. Maybe those who are familiar with requesting the refuges and precepts could lead things along, and those who are less familiar can tag along behind. Five precepts, yes. If you want to explain a little bit.